Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
In my association with Project Blue, they definitely withheld information.
The whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
Was it? How did I get muted again?
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Was I muted again the whole time?
You were muted the whole time.
So there's a mute button on this thing. Okay. So this is the problem. So I have what's called a streamer box. And this is it's been driving me nuts. But StreamYard automatically mutes you, right?
Oh, no.
When a video plays, it automatically mutes you. But I mute myself just in case. And then when I unmute myself, it doesn't correlate with StreamYard. So that whole opening is gone. And it just drives me nuts. It's happened like 3 or 4 times in a row. But anyway, we have a lot going on. I thought to myself, how can we end season 1 of Total Disclosure before we break? Who would be the best guest? And I said to myself, let's go out and get Danny Sheehan. And I did. So Danny Sheehan is going to be the final guest of Total Disclosure season 1 before we go on break for a month and I finish the movie that we're working on that I just released a trailer on. We're doing really good on the audio side, everybody. But if you can like, share, subscribe on YouTube, that's where we really need the biggest boost in numbers and viewership. So I'm really excited to get the show started. We have a really good one for you. I'm totally botched the intro. Super upset about that. So I just kind of want to roll past it. Teresa, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, we need to figure out a way to. I was trying to text you, but I'm sure you don't have your phone right.
Well, it's because I'm looking dead in the camera and I'm trying to get the gravitas, right, of not being in the moment. And when I do my intros, I do them hard, and I go through them and I go, I even gave the date of disclosure during that one, and everyone missed it. So sorry to say.
So I mean, it looked really good.
Well, anyway, so this is why I need a producer, and this is why I need to move in with Jess so she could be sitting here saying, "Hey, idiot, you have no sound." But again, we're not Jimmy Church Radio, and we don't have news producers and people that do sound checks for us. So, anyway, listen, we talked about a big story last time we were live. Jerusalem preparing for what seems to be return of a Messiah figure. You got a lot of feedback on that. Tell me about it.
I did. That was a very popular show. The last live show we did was about the red heifers in Jerusalem and how they are preparing for the return of their Messiah, who is not of this earth. So by definition, they're preparing for the arrival of somebody or something that is extraterrestrial, by very definition. And we talked about by very definition, and then we talked about the red heifers and how they have shipped to Jerusalem 3 perfect red heifers from Texas. They have been inspected like with a magnifying glass from nose.
Yeah, we literally had that picture. They had a magnifying glass to it.
Yeah, from nose to tail, they have checked to make sure there is not a single white or black hair on those cows. It's nothing but red hairs. They have to be absolutely perfect. And then then they sacrifice the heifers and then they purify with the ashes. Anyways, that's expected to happen by the end of spring in Jerusalem, and they're taking very real steps to prepare for the return of an entity that is not of this earth. And so is that why the United States is talking about interdimensionals and non-human intelligence right now? Is that why this is an issue right now? It was a very popular show. I got a ton of feedback. Every time I logged into Twitter, I was invited to a new Twitter Spaces where somebody wanted to discuss, carry on the discussion. I think there are a lot of people who are very interested in that topic. I think a lot of people have kind of put it together. They've read whatever their religious text is. In this case, most of it was mostly the Bible. And, people have read their Bible and they've said, well, wait a minute, they are talking about sky people. That's what they're talking about here. And, what do we call sky people? We call them alien or extraterrestrial, or David Grush used the terminology interdimensional. We're talking about an intelligence from another place.
I want to ask you something. So the implications, the hard truth Sorry, and I'm still getting over COVID, guys. So my voice, it's like my voice is already pretty deep and raspy, but it's even worse right now. Um, so if this, because you and I have hypothesized many times about my theory that they know something's on its way. And the correlation between the two, I find uncanny, right? Just the way it's being set, the stage, the world stage is being set for something, some paradigm shift. What happens when these ships come down and instead of a long bearded white, because Jesus, I hate to tell all the Americans, Jesus was probably not white, probably looked more like Osama bin Laden, if he was a real person, um, just by where he grew up and and so he probably had darker skin, with the beard. So, but what if that guy doesn't show up, and what if an ET looking being comes down, descends, gets off the ship, and says, I am your savior? Like, what are the implications of that? Does does do we look at it differently because it's not us? Or, you know what I mean? Are they going to shapeshift and look like us to make us feel better? And then, or are they going to send us some JPEGs of what they look like before they get here? That way we can open them and be prepared and, like Tinder, swipe left or right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. And will
I
they?
stole that from Jimmy Church, by the way.
Uh,
Just wanted to,
well,
the
at least
Tinder
you're giving
thing.
credit.
Yeah.
Great material, Jimmy. Hey.
I love Jimmy, but he's got to
Yeah.
chill with the Chumba Casino ad. Dude, it's the only ad that plays on his thing, and it's driving me insane.
Yeah, it's
Chumba Casino. It's like chumba, 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 chumba. And dude, I want to take my phone and because like I work early mornings, so when I hear that ad played 38 times in one podcast, like I want to throw the phone out the window. And I'm like, Jimmy, come on, let's mix it up here.
Well, it sounds like it's an effective ad, right?
It's very effective. I know it. It's in my sleep.
Yeah, it's sticking with you. Yeah, so the implications of that are huge. I mean, I don't think people will say, well, this is our first contact. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's the first contact in our common memory. But I think that
Thank you for
they've been
subscribing.
here. I think they've been here. I think they've been here before. And yeah, it is a weird ritual. I mean, it is. I mean, that's very if somebody made the comment, what a weird ritual. Yeah, I mean, we're talking really Old Testament animal sacrifices here. And then, and then that begs the question, well, were we feeding them? Is that why you had to bring, I really think there's a very good argument to be made that these are human like entities who ate food and and just like we do, they had needs, and we would bring. That's why you would bring the best of all of your crops. You would bring the best of your animals. You would bring the best food that you had to the temple. And why would you do that unless they're eating? So
right.
I think their needs are very similar to ours. They apparently eat food, that we do, and and we were feeding them. So I don't think this is the first time. I think there are a lot of times in history when we were living with them. They were living amongst us. So I don't think it's first contact. It's first contact in our modern memory. And I think we have to really
Graham Hancock says it the best. We're a species with amnesia, right?
Yeah,
So
that
this
is
will, just like you said, this will be first contact for us in the modern day. And because we have amnesia. We don't know our origin story. We don't know that they've probably been here the whole time, like you said. And that, I know we're going to talk about Avilobe and dimensions and all that, but I find it to be a much more, but it would be, what would be more surprising, that they're coming here from a different star system, galaxy, universe, or would it be weirder if they were coming from here, under our
Yeah.
oceans, right under our noses,
Right. Yeah.
or
Well, I think
occupying the
both.
same space without us knowing?
I think both are very possible. I mean, I think there's a lot of good evidence to make the argument that they had bases here, and possibly even on the moon and Mars and other
Well,
planets. So it would make sense that they would have a base here. So it could be both, It could be that they originate someplace very far away, and then they have bases here. And just like we send our military out, somewhere, they would send a team out, and they would develop a base, and have all of the necessities locally that they needed. I think there's a lot of good evidence for that. And if you look at a lot of the origin stories and mythological stories, it seems to indicate that also. So I think both are possible.
Mm. And equally, uh, um, revolutionary. No matter what, it's gonna be a wild day. That's for sure. But I wanted to talk. So we just went through a solar eclipse. I think everybody knows this, right? I live streamed it the best I could. Definitely could have done much better. But I was not prepared. I did not know what to expect. First time ever doing something like that. So now I know. You can't do it without like a legitimate, like, telephoto lens and special hardware. So anyway, the moon has been in a lot of people talking about the moon lately, right? It's just something that's been in conversation. The sun, the moon, yada yada. The moon, a lot of people think it's either hollow because it reverberated like a bell when we hit it with rockets, and we did this multiple times. Also, that only one fight that were stage locked. So what that means is we see it's perfectly oriented so that the moon rotates, or does it rotate, or does it stay locked in orbit? What so
It
what I'm trying to
rotates
say is we see
at
the
a rate.
same side the whole time.
Yeah.
We never see the backside. And then it's perfectly distanced away. It's perfectly sized to eclipse the sun. And a lot of people think that is much too there's too much variable for all of that to align. What do you give? In their ancient texts that talk about a time before the moon.
There are. Yes, there are. They talk about a time before the moon. They do. Yeah, the moon is interesting. Like you said, there are reports that it did ring like a bell. Do you remember when we wanted to bomb the moon? I don't know, you might be too young to remember that.
I'm too young to remember it, but I know of the attempt.
Yes, I think it was the late 1990s or the early 2000s. They actually wanted to send a nuke to the moon. They wanted to
Which
nuke
would
the
just be
moon.
like the dumbest, like that would be like the most ape-like thing you could do. And
Yeah.
would have been crazy if they did try to launch that and someone was just like, nope, sorry. What
Right.
would have
They got
happened?
shot
Or
down. Yeah.
did we get talked out of it?
Right. Yeah, that's
Why,
pretty
why
crazy.
haven't we been to the moon since the 60s? And why in recent NASA press conferences did they say there's the challenge of getting through the Van Allen belt? Well, if we solved that in the 60s, then why are we worrying about it now?
I don't know. Do you think we really went to the moon then? Do you
I'm
really
not going to say it's Kubrick's greatest film. I'm not there yet. I'm not.
Do you really
I'm,
believe though? I'm not convinced that we really went to the moon in the 1960s. I mean, my iPhone has more computing power than they had then. And supposedly we went through, the Van Allen belt, all of that radiation. We were able to by hand with slide rule make all of those calculations to be perfect just to get there and back. I don't know. I mean,
well, I don't take it. So here's a big problem with like some people in Ancient Aliens. They say that it takes away from human ingenuity and human will. And like, don't get me wrong. There's when humans set their collectively, when humans set their minds to a goal, there's nothing that we can't do. The problem is factionalization. And competition is healthy. I think the space race was healthy. What isn't healthy is the space war, right? That's happening now. And to say that we didn't go to the moon would be a very large statement. And I don't know if I'm ready to say that. And to say that we didn't go, did we go later and stage the flag and do that? Potentially.
well,
Did we
we're
land?
going.
Did we only land once, not 3 times, and fake the other 2? I think that might be a better um um I think that would be a more plausible conspiracy, is that we didn't land as many times as we told the public, showed the public. We only landed the once, and then everything after was just, to justify the budget. Why go up a second, third time, when we already had them go up there and collect what they needed? And you know what? They talked about being followed. We're on the first trip where we straight up told, don't come back here.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. Well, we
So
are
who
going back
knows?
there. We are going back. I just
We're
read
supposed to
today.
be in 26, but who knows?
Yeah, well, apparently we are, and we're going with the Japanese, and it's going to be a Japanese astronaut who sets foot on the moon for the first time, um, for the first time again.
Well, good.
Apparently, right?
They
Yeah, so
deserve
it's
that.
going to be a Japanese astronaut. I think Biden just announced that yesterday or today. I just read about it today. So that's exciting, and I think that will probably be a real mission. I think we really are going to space now. I know that we really are. We do have a space station, and we've probably made. There's probably a lot we've done in space that isn't quite reported. It'll be exciting to see, real modern day, footage of someone going to the moon. That will
Well,
be exciting.
that's what's gonna blow this, and that's what I'm so intrigued. Of course, I mean, if they're going to the moon, we're live streaming the whole thing, like the whole fucking thing. I don't care. I'll stream for 3 days straight if it needed.
Yeah.
But just picture the quality of when we went the first time versus the quality of what we'd be getting back this time. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, we would be virtually be seeing the crystals, they could bring IMAX cameras up there if they really wanted to. So, I'm really, really interested in them going back and them having to really answer for an unblurry photo.
Yeah, and each astronaut will have their own Twitter account, and they'll be talking to school kids in their classrooms. It'll be cool. It'll be really cool,
Yeah,
and
it'd be
hopefully,
amazing.
we are on the cusp of that we've talked about this a lot of times before. We're on the cusp of the next industrial revolution, and it's the space revolution. And what better way to really make that clear to the next generation than to go land some people on the moon? There hasn't been a generation who's actually experienced that excitement since the I guess it was the baby boomers in the 60s. So it'll that I'm looking forward to that. That'll be cool. And then we're supposed to be going to Mars. Elon, come on. What's going
Do
on with
you
that?
think you actually think that his plan right now is going to work? There's a million different ways that plan could go wrong, because it's a set of have you been watching the 3-body problem?
No, but I've heard of it. What is
Oh
that time?
God, you need to watch the 3-body problem.
Yeah, tell us
It
about
is
that. What is that?
why no, I'm not gonna tell anyone about it.
Well,
It is against my religion to
eh,
spoil anything.
well, what's it
I
about?
will say this. It's similar in a way to, so there's a scene where they need to get to 99% the speed of light. So they formulate this idea of a series of nuclear explosions, setting a sail made of microfibers. So, like the idea of a sail. So the radiation would push the sail, with each gamma burst, right? And that's kind of what Elon wants to do, in a way where it's a bunch of different stages of refueling, stopping. There's just so many there's like 37 different refueling stops that you have to make to do it. And as of right now, with jet, he says we can do it with modern propulsion. I highly doubt it. I'm just saying.
Sort of think
I
we've already.
highly doubt it. And did you see he just did a talk where he said that we're probably alone. He said, and then no, it wasn't you shared it. He says in the same talk that he says that we're probably alone, he says we need to go to Mars because we need to make Star Trek a reality. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Star Trek teeming with life through the galaxy?
It was.
Right.
But I'm of the belief that we've already been to Mars, and we're
So
probably
you think
a
there's a
lot.
secret space program?
Oh, I'm positive. And I think that
I do too.
we're probably way out there, much further than
If
any.
we have UFOs, we have a secret space program.
Probably.
Put it that way.
Well, do you remember Gary McKinnon and what he uncovered when he when he hacked into NASA?
With and he found, I've actually reached out to him.
And is he
And
allowed to
talked to
talk?
well, he can do virtual podcasts as long as he stays, just like with Rogan. Rogan brings on Snowden from Russia. As long as it's virtual, they can't do anything, right? The best they could do is, I'm sure he's running encryption software as well. So, in a VPN at least. So, Snowden's a smart guy, but, I'm sure McKinnon would be doing the same. But McKinnon just appeared on a podcast recently, and I just think that there's this. So what he found, what you were getting into, is these off-Earth officers. So these, what did they call them specifically? Because there's like NCOs, which are non-commissioned officers. Then it was like a tag. It was a designation. It was like off-world officer. Let's just say it was that. Off-world officer.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, it was off-world. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, whatever it was. and he started getting a list of these people, and almost, this is back when dial-up internet existed, and
Right.
like there is a legitimate problem with loading one picture. So like, so while he's loading the picture, they figure out that he's tapping into their network and shut it down. So
Right.
he only ends up with half of a, half a story, if you will. But it broke the internet. I mean, it broke, not the internet. It broke the internet, because the internet in the early days was just porn and UFOs. So it broke the internet, but it also went mainstream because the US tried to extradite him. Like they really, and that's what made it so weird. It was either they were sending a message early on in cyber attacks, like, we're not going to stand for it, which again is probably the more plausible scenario, or they were pissed that he was able to find such things.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it was both. They were pissed and they were sending a message. But yeah, he found evidence of off-world officers, of different ships. He had the names of ships. He saw these off-world ships. And you know what? And I think that's all under Navy. It's Air Force that, Trump opened Space Force up for, but that's just satellites and stuff. I do think that there is a space program that's been going on, and I think it's under Navy. That's why
you
they
think
think,
it's under the Navy?
yeah, and that's
So,
why
but who's been the most silent?
Air Force has, yeah,
So
yeah.
what? I see my contradiction.
Well, Air Force has been most silent about these recent UFO sightings, but as far as uh, as far as an off-world military presence, I think
Well, yeah,
Navy.
you know what? You're right. You know what? You're kind of right. So the Air Force actually was only designated up until 80,000 feet, not even. And then after that, that's when Space Force or whoever that's when their domain starts, because the Air
Well,
Force is the air, literally.
and if you remember Chuck Schumer's amendment that he wrote for the UAP legislature and legislation, and he was
Which
trying to
they
get
have
that.
redrafted.
Yeah. Well, so one of the main points in there, when he starts talking about various agencies who were involved, he's very specific, and it actually, I think it says, and specifically Air Force, and specifically Air Force OSI. He made a real point to call out the Air Force in his amendment, and that's interesting because it was Navy. And it was Navy pilots who brought all of this to us in Congress. I think David Grush was the only one who was Air Force, who was one
Yeah,
of these.
he was.
Yeah. So,
And he was NRO.
yeah.
So,
And previous to that, he was a major in, I think it was the Air Force Intelligence. It was something like that.
Yep.
And yeah, so Air
His
Force was
credentials are just impeccable.
silent. Yeah.
So why do you think, let me ask you this question, because with the David Grush topic, I think a lot of people are a little disappointed. And I think they're right to be, that it didn't go anywhere. What's it going to take? Now, David Grush, 20 years ago, comes out, says what he says, gets in front of Congress, says what he says. Just him. Leave Graves, leave Fravor out of it. Just him. That's disclosure 20 years ago. Why? How is it today that does not stand the test of a news cycle? It blows my mind.
I know. And that's why, everybody, again, I keep reiterating, everybody thinks disclosure is an announcement from the president. My fellow American, they're going to They're going to
Yeah, the
interrupt.
classic, we're not alone.
They're going to interrupt your evening TV shows, and they're going to say, there's a...
Right, when nobody has
president-
cable anymore.
Yeah.
They're going to interrupt your fucking...
Well, I'm
They're
glad
going to
to hear
interrupt
that.
all the baby boomers.
I thought it was just me who didn't have cable anymore. Yeah, so they're going to interrupt TV shows. They're going to say, we have an announcement from the president. The president's going to say, my fellow Americans, we've come across great news that we feel everybody is entitled to know, and we would like to share this with the world, that we are not alone. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. That is an unrealistic expectation. I know a lot of people have put that out there. A lot of people, every election cycle, somebody's out there putting that out there, saying that this is a possibility and it's going to happen. It is not going to happen. It benefits unless they have something to gain from it, which they don't right now. Disclosure is not going to happen that way. But I see disclosure happening right now, Ty. I see it happening everywhere. I see it happening with what you and I are talking about. I see it happening with Paul Wallace. He is a former preacher, and he talks about, interpreting the Bible with new eyes. And I see it with Mauro Biglino, who is a former Vatican Bible translator. And he is literally retranslating the Bible with modern terminology. And that's making huge inroads. One of the biggest revelations I think that's come from that research is that the word that we used for that was translated as spirit should have been translated as craft. That's huge. That is huge. The original word was ruach, which was translated as spirit. And now when he goes back and he looks to the original word, the original pictograph for that word, it's clearly a craft over water. So the word that was translated as spirit should have been craft. That changes everything. We're not talking about a Holy Spirit, some disembodied, spirit that's everywhere all the time. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a craft, and it's very clear. And even when you look back at the ancient art, it's very clear. They're talking about a craft. So it's not the Holy Spirit, it's the holy craft. It changes everything. But I think this type of change is so revolutionary. I think it will really take generations to sink in. I mean, I was just reviewing one of my books from Dr. Carl Jung, who's a very famous psychologist from the 50s and 60s. And, he's known for his work in archetypes, which was actually going to be the name of my podcast until Meghan Markle took it. But maybe ancient archetypes would be a better name for my podcast if I was going to do one. But, archetypes are very important in this. And I was just reviewing his book on flying saucers. And, we're talking about a very prominent psychologist from the 50s and 60s. And he said, he very clearly said that it's inevitable that religion will morph into the worship of flying saucers. That flying saucers are going to will replace religion. Religion has nowhere to go to move forward into the future except this direction. And it makes sense. And when you look at what they're doing with Bible translation now, it really makes a lot of sense. So I do think that's where things are heading, but change is very slow. And people think that I still don't understand how it is people are waiting for their government to tell them what to think. And I think I have some dogs that need to calm down.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We get it. No, and I think you're absolutely correct. In one of the ways that I think God, I just completely lost my train of thought because I was thinking about Logan and I miss him. My dog is at my girlfriend's, so I haven't had him. And
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I know. I always miss them when they're gone too.
oh my God, it's like a kid.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
amazing.
It is.
But one of the cool things that so we brought up earlier is the time before the moon. Now, can you tell me anything about that?
I have not. That's not something I've looked a lot into. But you are right. There are a lot of, and there's more than one. And you know what? I can look into this and
What about maybe
good
next week we could talk about it.
Yeah,
Because next
because
week Mark D'Antonio might join us, and he's an astronomer.
fun,
So,
awesome.
yeah.
I do know that there are multiple civilizations who do say that there was a time before the moon. And, so what does that mean? Does that mean that that whatever created the asteroid belt in space, whatever also created the moon? Does that mean it was artificially moved there? Is that the
Yeah,
Death
like
Star?
was it towed into
Yeah,
place, into
right.
orbit? Was it created like imagine, because we look up into the sky and we see this thing and we just know it's there, and it's always been there, right? But again, I just can't help but think that, going back to that notion that we're a species with amnesia, um could the world could, could the moon have been brought here to stabilize what was a non-stable environment with promise? It was in the Goldilocks zone, right? It had the potential. It just needed a little tidal lock, right? Moon. They tow it in, seed life here. Boom.
Well,
Thousands of years later, we're having this conversation.
so
They're the
that reminds
saviors.
me, there is a big controversy with one of the moons of, geez, I haven't thought
Is
about
it
this for a
Jupiter?
while. It
Europa?
might be, I can't remember if it's Jupiter, but it's one of the planets. I can't remember which moon it is. Anyways, there's a
Give me a
moon.
little detail. I'll figure it
Yeah.
out.
So this is very interesting there, because it backs up what you're saying about was it towed there. There, one of the moons, and I can get this and bring it back to you next time if you're really interested. The moon that was towed. So this moon has rocks on it that you can clearly see how these rocks have been moved in straight lines, almost across the planet, the moon rather. The moon is covered in these lines and these streaks of where these rocks that were on there have made these lines. And I know somebody who went to a lecture, because we were discussing this. And so one of my friends went to a lecture with it was at University of Southern California. I don't remember who the speaker was, but it was a physicist, an astrophysicist. And so afterwards, my friend approached this astrophysicist about this phenomenon, and he said, "How are these rocks, streaked on there? It's almost as if rocks. It's almost as if the rocks were on the moon. The moon was towed, and then these rocks started to move back against the. They were pushed back against the."
Probably due to gravity or something.
Against the movement of being towed, because there's really not a good theory for how this happened. I'll have to look that up. And
please, if you don't mind,
yeah.
I would really love to follow up on that.
Because
speaking
this is interesting.
Speaking of which, remember that we talked about that story of the professor who broke the story about SETI receiving the signal?
Yes.
So he put out a part 2 and went deeper into it. So we're not going to watch it, but for anyone who wants to follow up on that, what basically he's saying, this guy's real skeptical too. What was his name? Ah, God, I forget. Professor Simon.
Oh, you're talking about that. Yes, Professor Simon.
Yeah, Professor Simon put out a part 2 to that whole thing. So initially, so this guy's legitimate skeptic, like skeptic, and
he debunks everything.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I want to talk about before we move on to the last the main subject of the night, CERN, and the LHC and Avi Loeb. This guy, he put out this, so he puts out this video, and he has a source inside SETI that is telling them that they've picked up not just like the wow signal, but some sort of repeating signal that they've determined, or at least are determining that it is some sort of message being sent. Could it be, something older that's just getting here now? Radio waves, they travel very slow. We don't know, but he did put out a part 2, and I highly recommend that people watch it. It kind of goes into more detail about it, and I think it's really cool.
Is that on the Professor Simon YouTube channel?
Yes, on the Professor Simon YouTube.
Wow. I can't wait to look that up. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Because
So,
he's a hardcore skeptic. He has worked to debunk almost everything, and he does a really good job. I mean, he's very scientific. So for this to be coming from him, that's a tough nut to crack, I think. So if it's coming from him,
yeah, it that's what I mean. It means something.
Yeah.
It's almost like I hate to say this, it's almost like Mick West coming out and saying, "Hey, I have." And it's not even, because Professor Simon is so much more credential than Mick, and I've had Mick on the show. He's a friend of mine, a good guy, just misunderstood. It's like if Mick West came out and like had a story about how he had a source, and now all of a sudden, he's like questioning it, right? Like he's like, this shit might be real. Like it's kind of like one of those moments, and it's really crazy to see, because this guy has been one of the people that people go to get debunkings from. So to see him make this switch has been remarkable. And I think everyone in the UFO community should take note of it, because it's not only just a good story, but if true, the implications they're only adding to what we're saying. Something's on its way. Something's here, but something else is on its way.
Well, I think that's very interesting about Professor Simon Tai, because he's British. He lives in the southwest of France, though, but he's British, and he's really popular in the UK. And so I wrote a letter to the King of England last June. And because, with all of my research that I've done, I found that, the royalty were basically seen, all royalty, they were basically, the whole point of them were to be the interim between the people and the gods. Well, if we know that the gods are extraterrestrials, that means royalty was here to be the interim between the people and the extraterrestrials. They had more of their genetics. That's why they were known as blue bloods. That's why they always interbred with each other, to keep their line pure. There's a whole history to that. It's very well documented. Most people are aware of these basics. So I wrote to King Charles after everything calmed down, after his coronation. I mean, just within his coronation, I saw so much that was that really indicated that he had a knowledge that there is an extraterrestrial presence within the Bible. I mean, he had the actual rock, Jacob's rock, where do you know the story of Jacob's ladder, where Jacob he watched as a whole bunch of angels, which we are not of this earth, right? So they're by definition.
So, like, yeah. So again, looking at it through today's scope and lens, we
So
could
he
say those are
extraterrestrials. So Jacob watched as all of these extraterrestrials, I can't remember if they ascended or descended from heaven, but they were going one way or the other between here and there. And he laid his head on a rock, and he marked that spot.
and now people go do it, right?
Well, and now they have that rock. So when a lot of people, when there was a mass exodus from the Middle East to the British Isles and other places throughout Europe, they took a lot of these artifacts with them. That was a big part of the Knights Templars too, was to secure that passage for people between Europe, the British Isles, and the Middle East. Well, one of the artifacts they took was Jacob's ladder. And the king actually had that, or the rock from Jacob's ladder, rather, that Jacob had laid his head on. The King of England actually had that rock underneath his throne that he was sitting on during his coronation. I mean, that's huge. Why, wow. He really had an artifact, a real world artifact from one of the most well documented extraterrestrial.
Where did she go?
Here? Oh, am I here?
You just dropped out on me there a little bit.
Oh, I didn't mean to. I didn't do anything. Maybe I'm not supposed to be talking about this, Ty. I don't know.
Yeah, you pissed someone off in the NSA. Your
maybe
NSA.
I should just make it short then. So I wrote
NSA agent Phil was like, "Nope."
Yeah,
done.
I know. They're like, mute her, kick her out. So I wrote a letter to the King of England about extraterrestrials, UFOs, and disclosure, because the King of England, or the Queen of England, the head monarch, is also the head of the Church of England. Because remember, they have their own church with their own beliefs. So I wrote a letter, and I just, I said, I'm a researcher, in the United States. I've been doing this for a very long time. And I told them a little bit about my family history, which they would know. I think I've talked about it a little bit on both sides of my family. I am the great niece of the first Bible translator, William Tyndale, who gave his life to translate the Bible into English. And he did that in defiance of the Pope at the time and the King of England, who was King Henry VIII, unfortunately, and he ordered his death.
So what he did was a very treasonous act, but one that allowed the masses to, one that allowed more people to be able to read it.
Yeah, his famous quote was that he wanted the boy who plows the fields to be able to have just as much access to reading the Bible as anybody in the church. Because at the time, Bibles were these great, big, huge, giant tomes, and they were chained down in the churches.
Right. The printing press wasn't there yet. These are very hard to come by.
And so just as the printing press was coming out, William Tyndall, he dedicated his whole life. He dedicated his whole life to translating the Bible. He learned all of the languages. He learned the Hebrew. He learned the Greek. He did he did the first translation into English, and
That's amazing.
yeah, and he gave his whole life for that. And when I first learned that, I was and I was actually published in the UK in the so there's still a Tyndall journal in his honor, and I was published in that journal, which was a great honor of mine to be published in the Tyndall Society Journal. And then, at the time I was thinking, what could have motivated a man? What could have made him so motivated to learn all of these languages, to go to school his whole life? He never married. All he did was dedicate his life to this one mission. And I thought, well, what could motivate him to be so committed to this one act? Even after he was arrested, he was put in prison, and the only thing he asked for was a pen and paper so he could continue his translation.
God.
Yeah. And
He just didn't
and then
waver.
and then I thought, well, geez, that what have I been doing? I've dedicated 35 years out of 45 years of my life to this topic, despite suffering some consequences for this, and I was inspired by a childhood event, and then ongoing events throughout my life. And I really wonder, it really makes me wonder if William Tyndall was also an experiencer, because every family member, every Tyndall family member, they were all experiencers in my family. And so it really makes me wonder if William Tyndall also had some sort of divine intervention that inspired him.
Well, do you ever notice that this is like the one topic that if you do have an experience, you drop everything and you don't stop until you're dead? It's like the only thing I've ever seen where once someone gets into it, they never come back. Like, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. They just never come back. They're on a mission. And so this, like, you see it with like the guys from the Nimitz, right? Fravor, right? He had an experience. Now he's dedicated to figure out what he saw, right? Mario Woods, same story. It's the same story. You go down the list. Each person that has an encounter with this phenomenon does not stop searching for answers until the day they die. It's the only thing.
It's sort of like that guy in Close Encounters and his mashed potatoes. It was so seared into his mind that he was sitting there making sculptures out of his mashed potatoes with
Literally.
what he saw, because it was so seared. Yeah, I think it's because, and last night I was researching about Teresa, the Catholic saint Teresa of Avila, and she was the first woman to receive a doctorate from the church for her work. So technically she's Dr. Teresa Avila, and she's the most famous mystic from the Catholic Church. And her experiences, she was levitating. People saw this. The experiences she had went on and on and on. And I think that once people get a taste of, once people have an experience that is really powerfully paranormal or divine in nature, it is so outside a lot of. So I think there's two tracks people can take, Ty. I think one track is people will completely deny it. It scares them. They don't want to talk about it ever again. I think there is that track. But then there's the other track of people who say, wow, this is so incredible. This is the most, this is the most miraculous experience I've ever had in my life. They want to have another one. They want to understand what it was. They want it to happen again. They want to know why them. I saw it with people, that I worked with in MUFON for years and years and years. So yeah, it's very powerful. And that's how you know that they've really encountered something that it changes people's lives. It really does. And I think, previously, a lot of those people we would have referred to as saints. I think a lot of the saints were experiencers, and
Yeah,
abductees.
like Chris Bledsoe, he'd be a saint.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
He would
Yeah.
100% be a saint if it was a different time period.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes, that's a good example. And I think a lot of these people, in another time period, like you said, they would have been saints. And so while we're on the topic kind of of these paranormal, paranormal encounters, I kind of wanted to talk about this case in Utah real fast.
Yeah, yeah, please. Give us
Before
the full breakdown.
Yeah, before we get into CERN, so there was it's a very sad case. It's a case of child abuse that happened in Utah, and it was heard around the world. It was reported on around the world. Ruby Franke and her female business partner, Jody Hildebrandt. And thank you, DC Contra. I appreciate it. So Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt were in Utah, and they were convicted of horrific child abuse. They each got 30 years for just unbelievable child abuse that it was terrible. These children, they were chained up. They had duct tape on their little ankles. The only reason I think they really lived is because the 12-year-old boy he snuck out a window and went running to a neighbor's house to get help. It was very sad. It was a horrible, horrible situation. And so this made world news. This was reported all, throughout the English speaking world, and probably a lot of the non-English speaking world, because of how, yeah, I know, because of how horrific it was. So I was learning about this. Case, and I discovered there's a huge paranormal element to this case. And I had no idea. I'd been hearing about this case all the way from the time when the little boy escaped, to when these women were being prosecuted, to when they were finally sentenced. And it was only just this past week that I learned that there's a huge paranormal aspect to this case. So one of the women, Jody Hildebrandt, who was the business partner, not the mother, she reported that she was seeing black shadow people. And that really caught my attention, because I actually, I did see a black shadow creature. And my dog, Flower, over here, that one there, she made contact with a black shadow person. And it was about 5:30 in the morning. I got up to go to work. I let her out, and I saw a black shadow up against the wall in the backyard. And it had 4 legs, but the front legs were much longer. And I couldn't tell what it was. I just woke up. I thought, that's a weird looking coyote. What is that? And Flower saw it too. And she went racing for it. And I thought, oh no. And she made contact with it. And the minute she made contact with it, she started screaming bloody murder. I mean, I literally watched my roommate and all my neighbors' bedroom lights turn on because it was so loud. It sounded like the dog was being murdered. And I thought, oh no, the dog's going to come back bloodied. I mean, is she getting decapitated? You know, all of these thoughts are going through my head. You know, what time is it? It's 5:30. You know, where's the emergency vet? I've got to be to work. All these thoughts. So she's screaming bloody murder, just horrific. I mean, it was blood curdling. And I'm preparing myself. And she comes back, doesn't have a scratch on her. Not at all. I inspected her, you know, head to toe or head to tail. Not a scratch on her. It was very scary. It was very weird. I did not believe in shadow people or shadow anything. And I'd heard about shadow people and the hat man. I'd heard about all of that. I didn't have any personal experience with that. I do now. So when this child abuser, Jody Hildebrandt, when she starts talking that she was seeing these black shadow figures, and that was about maybe 15 miles away from where I lived at the time. That really got my attention. So I started digging in further. And then I listened to the interview that the husband of this Ruby Frankie, it was her children. Her husband gave an interview to the police. And about 40, 50 minutes into the interview is when he says that he felt like the resident exorcist. And I think I sent you an article if you wanted to put that up so people could see. Anyway, Kevin Frankie went on to say that he felt like the resident exorcist because this Jody woman who had seen the shadow people, she was going into she was going into trances, that when she moved into their home, they started hearing footsteps and voices, and that plates started flying out and flying across the room. And this man was an engineer, a civil engineer at BYU, I think. So, you know, for him to be saying, you know, that he had witnessed all of these things with no explanation and telling this to police, that really got my attention. And then apparently this Ruby, it was her children, you know, this really, really bad Mormon mommy, she apparently was having these mystical experiences and these visions and these dreams. And so that is Ruby Frank and her husband, Kevin. And then I think I sent you a link where he said he felt like the resident exorcist. So when they let Jody, the friend, move into their home, Jody was going into trances. I mean, all of this really bizarre paranormal stuff. Ruby started to go and sleep in the bedroom with her because she was so terrified of these paranormal experiences that they were having. And the husband, Frank, he was performing priesthood blessings per the LDS Church to try to exorcise these demons. So it was fascinating.
So hold up. The Ruby was a vlogger with 2 million YouTube fans.
Yes. So so Ruby and her husband, Frank, they had 6 children, and they were vloggers and they were making millions of dollars a year from their vlog, based on their family, and it was called 6 Passengers. And apparently this was a really popular vlog. Millions, they had million. I think
Yeah,
I read it had over 1 billion views at one point.
Yeah, I mean, they probably put the subscription number here, but that doesn't mean the viewership number. Uh, they probably have 2 million subscribers, something like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, holy shit!
Yeah. So they were making millions of dollars with this vlog, this family vlog that they were doing, and it was called Six Passengers. And it was going great, and they were just raking in the money until Jody, who was a therapist, came on the scene. And she started giving them advice on how to discipline their children. And one time, the discipline was that the oldest son could not sleep in his bed. He had to either, I think he had to sleep on a beanbag for a month or something. That was his punishment. And that was so unpopular with their audience who was watching their, Six Passengers vlog, that viewership dropped drastically. And that was really the point, the turning point in their vlogging career, where their income just really plummeted. And so that caused them a lot of stress. And then the husband really started to dislike this Jody woman who was the therapist. But the wife, Ruby, was getting a lot of support from this woman, Jody.
Right.
But it was so fast forward, Ruby and Frank end up separating after their vlog fell apart and their millions of dollars in income fell apart. Ruby gets full custody of 4 of their kids because I think the 2 oldest ones were gone. And she was basically torturing the 2 youngest. Yep, there they are. So then she went into business with Jody, and that's Ruby there.
She has that
shirt. Mommy there.
The one in the red. That's that's the one.
That's the mom. And
she's got those eyes.
Crazy eyes.
Yeah, but that lady next to her she's calculated.
She is. I think you're very right. And that was Jody, who was the therapist. And so after the Ruby's family vlog took a nosedive based on Jody's advice, Jody and Ruby started their own channel together, and it was advice on raising children and families.
Yeah.
Because Jody was a therapist. But then it turns out Ruby's 2 youngest children were being tortured at Jody's house. Jody had a multi-million-dollar house. It's on the market now for $5 million in Ivans. Yeah. And nobody has still addressed how a therapist was living in a $5.5 million home. I mean, therapists are great, but they don't
make that much money.
No, they don't. I mean, even the husband said that in his interview with the police. The first time he went to her house, he was wondering, how is she making so much money to live here as a therapist? And he was an engineer.
Yeah, I know. Me and my girlfriend have a combined income of like 100,000. It's more than that, but I'm just gonna leave it there. And like we can't even get a fucking apartment.
Yeah.
How does this lady have a $5 million home?
Yeah. And then, so the home was originally put on the market for $5.5 million. They had to drop it down to only 5, and it is the most viewed home right now on Realtor.com.
Maybe we'll have to take a look into that one, see if we can get approved.
Yeah, well, that's where she was seeing the shadow people, and that's where.
Well, it says right here, Mr. Frank, 45, said that he started believing something disturbing was going on when the couple took a trip to Hildebrandt Living's home.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's this $5 million home.
It is.
The engineer claimed, now this is an engineer who seems to be the most logical and reasonable of the bunch, claimed that there are plates flying off the shelves by themselves at full speed, smashing onto the wall or floor.
Yeah, at this $5 million home, $5.5 million home. Yeah, so that was the home where they wound up tying up and torturing these poor kids. And I do think that they probably were on their way to murdering those children. The mother, Ruby, who was just totally cuckoo, she kept a diary. And she entered in her diary. I mean, she was recording torture that she was doing to her own children.
So do you think there's a possible, so do you think it's possible that now it's funny because I'm working on like a movie of witchcraft, and I can't help but start thinking that either she's loony, she loses her money, and she just loses her sanity, and that, right, it's prosaically explained. She mentally had a breakdown. Now let's take a step back and put some alternatives out there. Was this other woman dabbling in something that at her house plates would fly across the room, and apparently once they met her, I'm reading here, it ends with the weirdest crap started happening. So once they meet this lady, could they have been introduced and hitchhiked, like the hitchhiker effect? Could that have been something that happened? And could she have been jumped, possessed? I don't know. I mean, because I don't want to give her the benefit of the doubt because of what happened to the children.
It was horrific what happened to the children. And in her own diary, she recorded that. I mean, and we're talking about her 10, 11, 12-year-old son, okay? She said that she told him that he was so evil that he slithered around the home like a snake. I mean, it's just this dehumanizing talk that she was using towards her own children that, really, it sounds, I mean, and then they wanted to buy a property she and Jody wanted to buy a property in Arizona where they could fully discipline the children. And I think they would have killed them there. So I mean, they were all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
oh no.
most commonly known as Mormons.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Were they really?
They were all Mormon church members, yes. And in fact, Jody was going up north to Salt Lake City to meet with some of the real higher up LDS church leadership to get help for her shadow demon people. So that really begs.
All right, so what are we leaning on this one? Are we? I don't want to give her an out. I really don't, because but I'm not so quick to say that there's not something, because I'm not so quick to say that maybe she wasn't subject to something otherworldly that either corrupted her. People believe in exorcists, and if you believe in exorcists, you believe in possession. If you believe in possession, you believe in demons. If you believe in demons, you believe in non-humans. Right?
Yeah, that's a very
simple as that.
down. previous to having my own experience with the black shadow thing, I would have said this is all a bunch of crap. They're crazy and left it at that. But I really
that's what's crazy is you lived so close and you saw.
Yes, I was only
a shadow person.
About 15 at the time. I was only about 15 miles away, and I too had an encounter with a black shadow thing. And then
That's crazy.
When I was living there, I had a lot of weird had a lot of completely unexplainable things happen to me. I had like red hieroglyphic projections appear on my wall.
Yeah, you sent me some of these pictures and I need to back it up. I don't have them with me, but she's right.
Another time.
She's and you've had some weird stuff happening lately too.
I have. So I moved from there. Not because, there were child abusing crazy people, but I left, and even since I left, I've captured some really bizarre I don't even know what to call it, some really bizarre lights or orbs on my security camera. The first night,
if I were to like describe it, I would say if anyone's seen the Skinwalker Ranch, it's almost like the trail cam footage that they show, where it's this hovering light that splits into two, and and that's what throws me off. Because I mean, if it was one, the way it was moving, I could be like, all right, could be a bug reflecting back. But when it split into two and then went back into one, then I'm like,
yeah. And then,
I'm not so sure.
That was the first night. And then 2 nights later, it came back, but it doubled. So there were 2 of them that split into 4 and then went back to 2. And they're not moving. They're moving, but it's not in any kind of natural way. And these are very bright lights. And they're very small. But they're not moving like with the winds. There's not any kind of rhythmic movement. You can see debris and stuff like flying in the wind. You can see other bugs flying. It's not those. Do you have those videos to put up?
No, I sadly I didn't upload them.
Okay. Well, next time we can look at those.
I'll definitely do that for next time because we got to jump into the next story anyway. But
I'm not too far from where I live now. I'm not too far from Skinwalker, and I just really wonder what is going on in Utah.
Yeah, I'll say this in anticipation for next week. The videos of they're interesting. They're interesting. For sure.
They are on my Twitter if people are interested. And so are the red Egyptian hieroglyphic projections. And then a light that appeared on a cross in my house on my mantle with no obvious source. I mean, it's almost like this light. It's bizarre. And you've seen those.
Actually, it's another weird. I don't even know if I should tell the story. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. Anyway, all right. So let's get into the last story of the night, our main story, and that is coming out of Avi Loeb, of all people, talking about the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC, operated by CERN, owned and operated by CERN. Is it Switzerland?
Yeah, it's Switzerland, and then it also, I think it's 2 countries, actually. I think it's so big, it crosses the border into another country and comes back. I might be wrong.
Okay. Yeah. So what he basically says, I'll bring the article up in one moment, but basically what he says is he thinks that any extraterrestrials could be using similar technology to what CERN is attempting to do. and that is open portals or access other dimensions. We, the public, have no record that they've done so far. I'm not so sure that they have not, because some of the conspiracies that are attached to the LHC, I want to jump into you with in a few moments, but right out of the gate, what are your first impressions of this?
Yeah, so when I first saw the article, I don't know if you want to put it up so people
Yeah,
can
I'll
see.
put it up now.
When I first saw the article, it says Avi Loeb says that they're trying to open portals at CERN that would be the same kinds of portals that extraterrestrials might use to travel in their UFOs here. Is basically the gist of it. And I thought, wow, well, that's really interesting, because that lines up
It's a bold statement.
that lined up exactly with what David Grush, the whistleblower, was testifying to Congress about last year. David Grush, the whistleblower who spent a lot of time testifying before Congress, his testimony, he never once used the word extraterrestrials. His testimony was about non-human intelligence that was interdimensional. And he kept using the words interdimensionals and non-human intelligence. And now we have Dr. Avi Loeb from Harvard talking about the ability of a other civilization to use higher dimensions to travel interdimensionally to come here. So that, these stories are lining up now. And so it goes on to say that CERN is, making an attempt to open these higher dimensions.
Well, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it for everybody here real quick. So Avi Loeb, known for his efforts to prove we are not alone, has claimed that extraterrestrial visitors are traveling through hidden dimensions created by researchers at CERN Particle Accelerator are seeking, which doesn't make sense. So they need to update that, because I when I read that, I go, you need to fix that, because that doesn't make any sense. The accelerator, the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, blasts particles at, again, messed up, at nearly the speed of light to recreate conditions of the Big Bang, with hopes of uncovering hidden dimensions that will reveal how our universe formed. Speaking in a new documentary, Loeb said that alien civilizations may have been developing dimension hopping technology for billions of years. The physicist also noted that extraterrestrials are using theoretical quantum gravity engineering to travel through curled dimensions that humans can only detect in particle accelerators such as CERN.
There you go. Go.
So again, they kind of ran with what he said and slapped the whole he said this, but he alluded to the possibility that extraterrestrials could be using and could be very, very far advanced in this technology. He didn't say that they are using it. He just says that it's something that he thinks that could be a way that they're and a lot of people do say that when they see these UFOs, they'll see them and they'll look like they're kind of like skipping through like skip, like a rock skipping through water. A lot of people say that when they see their sightings, that's what they see. So could that be what these things are doing, is curling space, and it literally, the ship isn't moving, they're just falling through dimensions.
And it would also explain how they appear to a lot of people to just kind of pop in and pop out, that's what they would be doing. but for us to witness for us to witness that, it would look like they're here and they disappear. They're here and they disappear. And if they are, in fact, going into a higher dimension and then coming back out, that's exactly what it would look like to us. It would look like they're here, they disappear. They're here, they disappear. We're basically the flatlanders. And we're witnessing possibly, somebody from a higher dimension putting their finger, into flatland. And then the flatlanders, don't see the entirety of the finger. They just see slices of it as it moves through flatland. If anybody's seen Carl Sagan talk about that's the best way to visualize that. And and so it makes sense, because if any advanced civilization was going to try to visit us here, they're not just gonna put a gallon of petrol into the old spaceship and fire it up and go tootling through space for 20 light years. That's not possible. So they would have to have some sort of advanced way to travel,
especially if they're biological beings.
Yeah, so they would have to, an interdimensional travel would be the way to do that. If they could go up a dimension and then pop back out. I think we've talked about it before, kind of like the bread loaf. If the bread loaf is time and we're the worms going through the bread loaf, and every slice of the bread loaf is a day or a minute or a week. And we, as the worms, all we can see is the slice in front of us, which is the time that we're in now. But if you could exit the bread loaf, you would be able to see the entirety of time, and somebody's life would look like a worm trail. And if you could pop out of the bread loaf, which is the entirety of time and everybody in it, you could pop back in at any point. And so that would be the best explanation for how they would be traveling. And so does that add up with what we've heard about them traveling? And it does, because there's actually relativity in the Bible. I
think it adds up. It's the only, it solves the inertia problem, right? Because you're not technically moving. You're essentially dropping through dimensionalities. So you're relative, but you're basically folding space and time. So you're not moving, you're just kind of falling through. So
they would be moving space and time around them.
Right. So therefore, no inertia, no inertial effect. It doesn't explain, some of the stuff that we've seen here on Earth, but I think those might be unmanned probes, like the Tic Tacs. I think they're unmanned to some degree. I think those are the probes that are here right now that are just constantly monitoring before the big ship gets here. But that's just me,
That would be the Watchers.
Yeah, the Watchers. Yeah.
The Watchers.
So,
hi.
But
so it explains. So in the Bible, it actually says, that each day for Jesus is 1,000 years for us. So quite
each
literally,
day for Jesus is
quite
1,000 for us.
And so quite literally, that is the theory of relativity right there in the Bible, thousands of years before Einstein came up with that.
Well, what if that just means that he's on a different planet? And all right, so not to break it down here, God, I just had a coughing bout. Remember that scene in Interstellar where they go down to the surface of the water planet, and every minute that they spend there is like 100 on Earth?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And 100 on Earth. And 10 for the guy
Yeah.
in orbit. Yeah.
What if that's what that means? That he's out there.
Yeah.
It's not literal. I mean, it's not literal to like his genetics, but it's the Bible trying to tell us how far away he is.
Yeah, I mean that's and if you're going through, it doesn't matter how you're traveling. If you're just putting through space, or if you're going super fast, it's the gravity and it's the speed that changes how time is perceived. So yes, if we have these an advanced civilization that is going through higher dimensions or wormholes through higher dimensions, then time would be very distorted, just like it was in Interstellar, because that's what they did. Remember, they went through a wormhole that was opened, and they were in a whole nother. Well, eventually, he was in a higher dimension, where he was.
That's why I love that movie.
I love that movie too. That is one of my favorite movies,
And
and every
contrary
time
to
I watch it, I get more.
contrary to popular belief, Nolan did bring in like physicists and people to consult with.
They did consult with one physicist. It was Sarfati's buddy. Geez, I can't remember what his name was, but he did help with that. Especially with the Tazarek and the four-dimensional scenery and what that would look like. It was Kip Thorne who helped with
okay. Yeah,
yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense actually.
I love that movie because what a challenge to visually depict what it would look like to go up a dimension. And they did such
It was mind-blowing.
Yeah. And they did such an amazing job. And and then to find out, well, I don't want to give away spoilers, but
it's no. There's okay. So here's the thing. All right. You don't come from the pop culture world. I do. I'm gonna give you a little rundown here. Spoilers exist for like, let's say, the first 4 months. I'd say you want to give people at least 4 months, and if they haven't if they have not sought it out by then, that's their problem. It's not yours.
All right. Well,
But if you're in like weeks, you can't do that. Like, I will not talk about the 3-body problem. I won't even hint at anything about it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm gonna look it up. So you've given
Number
me
one. By the way, but you know what this does for the topic? Guess what? It was the #1 watch series on Netflix. So, and it is all about alien contact. So that just shows you that the audience, the general audience, right? The everyday Joe, to be able to comprehend a series like that, I mean, I think we're getting there, Teresa.
Yeah, it's another part of disclosure, right? It's what Professor
Well, it's what the HDA wants to do.
It's what Professor Simon talked about in the last video where we spoke about him, where he said that there was a United Nations decision to do like a 25-year drip disclosure campaign. And so for the top movie on Netflix to be apparently about aliens, like you just said, it sounds to me like that's another part of the drip disclosure. And it's happening. It's not happening the way people wanted or they thought, but it is happening, and we're part of it. Professor Simon is part of it. The way they keep putting movies out, and getting people to think about it and desensitized to it, and people are having these discussions. And you and I went to a talk earlier in the year about put on by the Aetherius Society about whether Jesus was an extraterrestrial. I mean, that was the title of it, and nobody had a heart attack. There weren't protests in the streets. people get it. I was even talking to a family member who was very extremely involved in the Jehovah Witness faith. And I thought this family member would be the last person to ever admit that we're talking about extraterrestrials. And this family member is also an engineer. And so I was very surprised when this Jehovah Witness family member actually came to me and said, "Yeah, I think you're right. We are talking about extraterrestrials, but then we could both agree that, capital G God, the overarching source of everything is not an extraterrestrial, and that is something else." So Stuck Being Jessica says, "Do you think something may be attached to you, like some sort of energy?" Are you asking me, Jessica?
Yeah, she was asking.
Yeah.
Because
So
that was from a while back.
I think
Yeah, do you have a hitchhiker?
I think that I come from a family line that has had contact for generations, going back all the way to the 14 and the 1500s with William Tyndale, the Bible translator. And that was kind of why I brought that up, because I think that he was also an experiencer. And we know that they tend to follow certain family lines. That's very well documented and known. And I think that I come from a family, coincidentally, on both sides. I think I come from one of these families that has ongoing contact. And there are various theories I have about why that is. But I think that
and you're gonna be talking about one of those bloodlines in the film that we're doing right now, and how it could tie into what we're researching here with the Dudley Road, the witches, the Salem witch trial, and the Bridgewater Triangle.
Yeah, I'm very excited. You're doing such a great job with that project. I can't wait for you to show everybody what you have so far. And I'm really excited to talk about that project. It's really a cool project, and you've done such an amazing job.
Yeah, and a little update. So I did finally get in touch with the Bridgewater Triangle researchers, like the guys who know the guys who know they did a movie on it already, and they're gonna help me with the Bridgewater stuff. And he's gonna help me, navigate the area, yada, 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 get in touch with witnesses. He's also going to do an interview himself, but we also have interviews from people from Homeland Security who won't even go on camera. Yeah, they won't even go on camera. And they had a sighting at Dudley Road. So not only are we going to be going back to like the colonial times, but we're going to keep it running parallel with what was going on in the past to what is happening now. And is the area just cursed, or is there something to do with the ley lines here or bloodlines? That's where you'll come in. I'm bringing in a remote viewer to see if there's any connection between the three. So I'm pretty much pulling out all the stops on this first film, and yeah, so it's gonna be really fun. It'll debut in October. It'll debut in 3 parts. So part 1 will be Dudley Road, part 2 will be the witch trials, part 3 will be Bridgewater Triangle, and then when it's done, you'll be able to watch it as one feature-length film.
That's great. I can't wait for people. I've seen what you showed me was just fantastic. You're so good at this, and I know that this is just going to be a hit, and people are really going to like it. The content is good.
Yeah, and then I mean, it doesn't even stop there, because my second movie that I've already signed on to do is documentary about the whole Mario Woods story. And luckily, Dan Zetterstrom of that UFO podcast is going to help me with that. And the sponsor of the show is going to help me with that. Getting down there, getting it all recorded. So lot on my plate, and that's why I'm gonna end the season of Total Disclosure podcast because I need to go work on stuff like that. But I think it's fun. Before we go, I wanted to talk about something, because I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember when they turned on the LHC?
Yes.
Do you remember the kid that said that when they did that they like broke our universe and shifted us into like another multiversal, like a many world theory kind of thing, where we were collectively shifted into another timeline.
Like another timeline. Yeah, I do remember
Right.
something about that. Yeah.
Do you think? Listen, I want to tell a story, but I don't. It's not just deja vu for me. Something changed, like in everyday life, all of a sudden. And what day did they turn that thing on?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Turned
I
it
don't
off
know.
and on a few times.
Does anyone, maybe
off.
someone in the chat, if someone of you could be nice enough, find out what the day is where they turned it on. I'm not, because I'm not gonna lie. I've said it before. All of a sudden, like, just something in me changed. I don't know what it was, but like my everyday life became different. The way I perceived it, like from the inside out, like it was different. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to. I can't convey it into words. I can't quite. I can't quite tell you exactly what I mean, but something feels different than when I was in like elementary school and when I was in middle school. And then even when I was, the beginning of high school, it happened like right after I turned 21 and I'm 31. So I've been living with it for the past 10 years, not really understanding it. And I don't know if does anyone else feel like that? Does anyone else have those feelings? Because I know people who do. I know, because I've talked to people who feel that something's different. Like something shifted, something changed. I don't know. It could be, I could have been, I took mushrooms too many times. I don't know. I really don't.
Well, there are
Like,
people who say that it's open portals, and
right.
whatever. I mean, it's super top secret research there that they're doing. So whatever they tell us, I don't ever expect is the full story anyway.
Well, I was told I was like a super soldier.
Well,
or something.
they did prove the God particle, right? Didn't they
The
prove
God particle, yes.
Yeah, they did prove that. And maybe they have opened some portals, and maybe something did come through or go out. I'm really starting to wonder if the biblical hell is another dimension. Maybe it's like a lower dimension, or I'm starting to give that evidence.
There's one thing I'm about to break my goddamn rule. Oh my God, I hate myself so much. I need to tell you this about the 3-body problem.
Okay.
There's one thing. One thing. Guess what they call the aliens?
What?
My Lord.
Wow. So they really are preparing people to equate the alien
There are
with
people who are in touch with the aliens in the series, and they call them my lord.
well, in psychological terms, we call that priming,
So,
where they're
like,
beginning to prime the population to
the,
put the two together.
so I can't even believe I didn't even start with that. Oh my God. Like, because I instantly thought of you. I'm like, oh my fucking God. Like, Teresa we were right. Something's coming. And like the three body problem, I swear to God, it's our whole hypothesis. I guess it's hard to spoil something when you already knew it, right? It's exactly our hypothesis.
Oh,
I'll put
awesome.
it that.
Well, I'm
So
going to watch it tonight then. Do you want to
it's
see if the
8
audience?
episodes of just absolute. It is 8 episodes. You won't get through it in a night. I could. You
Oh, I
can't.
might.
You
I might.
might.
Do
But
you want to see if the audience has any questions and then wrap it
yeah.
up? Because now I got to go see this 3 body problem.
Yeah, and there'll definitely be a season 2. Don't worry about that. Yeah, if anyone is, so what I want to do eventually, we need to figure out a day and a time that I'll go through the analytics and I'll see when most of our subscribers and when most people are on YouTube, and we'll go through and we'll figure out a day, because we're gonna do it consistently, one live show a week. You know, aside from any impending, you know, things, maybe miss a week for this or that. But the plan is to do a live show every week, and eventually what I want to do is I want to be able to, and maybe this will be something that we can look forward to when I move and we get the podcast studio set up. But I'd like to do like a call in, like, maybe like the last 30 minutes, have people be able to call in and like, just do like a free for all kind of segment. So
Yeah,
that
I think
way,
people, I mean, people want to be involved, and they're
like right
watching.
now we have 150 people watching. Probably all from Twitter. Twitter, like I will
Hello,
go.
Twitter. We love you.
I will go full I'll go Twitter exclusive on the videos. Like I will, but there has to be a way to, and I'm not saying this stubbornly, because fuck YouTube. Clearly, at this point, it's embarrassing, because like my audio will do like 35,000, right? Easy, right? And then I can barely crack 1,000 on YouTube. And then live, whenever we're live, it's like over 150 people, and 99% are on YouTube. So, I mean, on Twitter. So if you like did something like YouTube where you allowed like, monetization, just to throw in the ads and allow the creator the affordability to go exclusive to X, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Clearly the audience is there. I'm looking at it right now. I would do it. I'd drop YouTube in a heartbeat, because I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of YouTube. Someone needs to compete with them. And I think X has that. I think X has the
potential.
possibility, the potential.
Yeah.
Even Spotify. But Spotify originally said that they were going to roll out video for everybody. Turns out, no. It was everybody who uses their platform. Like anyone who uses Spotify for podcasters gets video, nobody else. But originally it was supposed to be everybody, because they wanted to widen it and be a media company rivaling YouTube, right? They didn't want to just be an audio company. They wanted to be a media company. And I see X going that direction right now. The audience is clearly on X, at least for UFOs. Yeah. Look, it's like 15 watching on YouTube, and the rest of the 100 are watching on Twitter or Rumble. So
Well, I just
it's
want to say I love our UAP UFO X family so much. I love
yeah,
you guys
me too.
so
Me
much.
too.
You guys are can you I don't, you guys are
Yeah,
so
we could see
great.
it.
All of you are so great, and I've been a part of that for years, and it's just been really wonderful to see it really develop and take off. I've been a part of that off and on with various accounts since 2017, and I just love to see the community and how it's just really taken off. So thanks for being here. We love you.
Yeah,
And
we
does
do
it
love you.
does anybody have any questions, Ty? Can you see, are
So
there
I
any
actually just
comments?
learned that in order to comment, so X updated their platform, and the comments from X, even if they're typing any, aren't coming in through StreamYard.
Oh, no.
So I wouldn't even know. You have to apparently you have to click some button to allow the chat to go through the platform on
Oh,
the user end. So if you're watching on X, you have to click some agreement in order to be able to chat so that I can pull it up on the screen. So
well,
um
one thing we could do is after the show, we could open a Twitter Spaces for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and people who watched the show or had questions, we could do,
that's a
10
good idea.
minutes in a Twitter Space. Yeah, I love Twitter Spaces. That's another great
Yeah,
thing.
I
Love X.
listen, I
Elon.
like Twitter Spaces, but I'm a video guy. I love video.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
do.
No,
I like it. But I'm okay. I'm okay with just the Spaces thing. It's just, so I always say, and I've always said that a podcast that has more than 3 people it tends to be junky, because people talk over each other. um and it just happens. It's natural. We're all in different places. We all have different Wi-Fi. We're all, someone's lagging here, someone's lagging there. It happens all the time. And with the Spaces, if you allow a lot, like a lot of speakers, it can be, the space can get derailed really quick. So for me, these kind of one-on-one conversations are what I thrive in. And of course, what I'll be sticking with in the movies. But yeah, I would not be open. I would definitely be open to that. I mean, I want to engage community as much as possible. I love them I mean, they're the reason the show is able to continue. Because I mean, without them, there is no show. I do the show for nobody. Even if no one listened, I would do it. I really would. I'd do it because I
Well,
love
I
it that
feel like
much.
history. I mean, I feel like, someday archaeologists will look back on these things and be like, "Oh, look at they were ahead of their time." Yeah, I
Yeah, look
really,
at them having the right conversations
yeah,
before the
like
before the
every,
rest of the idiots caught up with them,
yeah,
right?
everything, in the future, future archaeologists will look back like on these videos and say, "Wow, look at those two. They were so ahead of the time. They were really." I really believe that. I really believe we're creating
Well,
historical documents here. It's really I
well,
that yeah. Even on
if
Twitter.
any of my grandkids are watching, I apologize. I
No, we love
I
you.
apologize for the genetic thing that I gave you. I apologize. And if you do not have disclosure by the time you're watching this, I'm talking, my kids. If you guys don't have disclosure, start a revolution, because at
Love it.
that time, it's the only thing that's gonna work, right?
Well, I
So,
think we're ready
um,
now.
we'll leave it that. Teresa, how can people keep in touch with you? How can they find you? How can they keep the conversation going?
Okay, so they can find me on Twitter at what am I on Twitter? I'm at Tyndall
You're
Review.
at Tyndall Review.
Yeah, and that's Tindal Review. And then my name is Tyndall Lobbyist, which is Tyndale lobbyist. And that is the Old English Tyndale lobbyist.
Yes. And as always, for total disclosure, just search total disclosure, look for the red UFO, and then look for my ugly face if it's a video platform, and you'll see it. Just kidding. You know what it is, guys. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, share the video, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. We are going to leave you with our sponsor, Adentia Herbals. Read Adentia Herbals Biomind. Introducing the ultimate cognitive enhancement solution, Biomind. Today's video is exclusively brought to you by our sponsor, Adentia Herbals. Unlock your brain's full potential with a powerful blend of 9 meticulously selected plants and mushrooms, each backed by peer-reviewed research for their cognitive boosting benefits and safety. Adentia Herbals formula combines organic full-spectrum powders and potent standardized extracts, ensuring that you receive the optimal concentration of each ingredient's cognitive enhancing compound, carefully selecting the most desirable parts of each plant and mushroom to create a harmonious blend that supports your mental clarity and focus. But that's not all. They infuse each bottle with personal intention of improving the lives, the minds, and overall greatness of each of their customers. Because of their commitment to your well-being every step of the way, you're going to get an exclusive 25% off your order via www.adentiaherbals.com using our code TOTALDISCLOSURE at checkout. All the links will be in the description or on the screen.